Hey everyone, welcome to TEDxCMU's completely virtual Innovation Expo. My name is Kazi, and today I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Benjamin Schmidt. He's the president and co-founder of Robotics, an innovative startup based in Pittsburgh. So to just get started, can you talk about robotics, what it does, and what you do for the company?
Sure. Thanks for having us today. So robotics helps governments to better administer their public infrastructure assets. So we do that by sort of unifying all of the physical understanding of their assets into a single platform.
Cool. So let's jump right in. So robotics has two new products, Roadway OS and the AgileMapper. Can you talk briefly about both of them?
Sure. So robotics is coming up on about 4 years old now. It's like three and a half, three and three quarters. Our original product was all around. We used a smartphone to collect video data of road networks. We used that video data through a machine learning pipeline to identify and find potholes and other distresses within road surfaces. So you mount that smartphone into a car, drive around collecting that video data, and then we can find everything that a pavement engineer is interested in. Our two products today, so the roadway operating system as well as AgileMapper, really allow us to do a couple different things for a municipal government. So on the AgileMapper side, this is all about just straight up digitizing and creating that digital twin of a municipality's infrastructure. So one of the hardest problems in infrastructure management is that it's very difficult to get a good understanding of the entirety of the status of that infrastructure. So like, where are my potholes? Where are my fire hydrants? Where are my streetlights? And then the next level of question, which is, what is the status of all those things? Roads are included in that infrastructure bucket, and that trying to visually inspect all of your road network is a very difficult problem. AgileMapper helps to solve that by making data collection and then digitization of those sort of geospatial images really, really easy. The roadway operating system is slightly different in that if you think about that the problem I just described, which is here's the location of all of your assets, the things that you have to manage, the sort of next problem that you have is how do you actually manage all of that data, right? So like even with fire hydrants or signage, you can talk about like tens of thousands of those assets for even a small community. So building up tools and management, so like think about like database structures that help them to manage the life cycle of those assets, but also to sort of manage the process. So like, where are the work orders? Who fixes what, when? Did they get fixed? All those kinds of things. So you can think of that operating system as sort of a more encompassing asset management pipeline.
Cool. So you talked about that infrastructure for Roadway OS. Can you go more into like how that benefits the public and how robotics is different from its competitors?
Sure. So I'll start actually with the second one. So the most interesting part right now is that if you think about kind of our competitors, the competitor is really somebody from that government getting in a truck, paper and pen, and driving around, pulling over intermittently, taking some notes about what they're seeing, and then coming back to the office and compiling all that. That is really state of the art, kind of across the world at any level of government. So we're talking like small municipalities, cities, counties, states, federal government. That is still how the process is really handled of managing assets and infrastructure. So the robotics technology is really sort of leapfrogged that capability in that it's bringing in objective automated data and making that more accessible to all those tiers of government. So that's sort of the first aspect of this in terms of like the competition landscape or sort of what's the alternative without robotics. For the public though, very common refrain, I think everybody talks about it. I think it's a common theme here in the United States, but also sort of in every country in the world, which is, our infrastructure is crumbling or our infrastructure is bad. Every year, the American Society of Civil Engineers comes out and gives a pretty bad report card grading to American infrastructure, but that really is kind of the same across countries. Where we help, where robotics can help, and we're still relatively small, although we do have sort of a worldwide footprint, so it is growing in that, and that's really exciting, is we help public infrastructure by basically having a better process or a more data-driven process around how to actually tackle those problems. So one of the most common pieces that, if you think about it, right, like, the last time you hit a pothole, if we weren't in a pandemic and people were driving a lot, you probably would remember it. But if you remember back to like commuting, you'd remember hitting a pothole or you'd complain about it. But the flip of that is that you probably don't remember all the roads that were in good condition. And so you have this big sort of like subjective bias when it comes to infrastructure in that way. That's what we help to solve, is by creating objective whole network understandings that are based on a defined process that really give just the data that's, you can have a data-driven government, but if you have bad data to start with, you're going to make bad decisions, kind of that garbage in, garbage out. We help with that. That's how we can help, is by basically better understanding all of your infrastructure.
Cool. Yeah, that's really nice. So we have a demo now for AgileMapper that Todd, the product manager, showed. So we're gonna cut that in right now for everyone that's watching.
Hi, my name is Todd Sully, product manager at Robotics, and I'm here to tell you about our newest product, AgileMapper. By using a simple in-phone application called RoadSense, users record raw video data of any asset, road, sidewalk, bike, or walking path, and upload that video to the cloud when they're finished. The data is then processed and quickly rolled into the Robotics online GIS platform. One exciting use case for AgileMapper is the opportunity for users to inventory all their sidewalks and leverage that inventory to inspect them for compliance and overall condition. So let's take a closer look at this exact use case on the platform. Here we have a small neighborhood in Pittsburgh called Morningside. Now, what makes it such an ideal example for AgileMapper is that over the past year, every single household in this neighborhood had its lead water service lines replaced by the local water authority. Let me just zoom in a little bit on the map here, show you what I'm talking about. So this was a big job, and it required not only the removal and replacement of all the water lines, but also the replacement of every sidewalk slab that covered each line. So a new slab of concrete was needed to be installed every 20 to 30 feet or so. By doing a full inventory of the sidewalks from May 12th, 2020, our user can monitor the condition of each concrete slab and ensure that the work completed by the contractor is holding up as expected. What you'll also notice as we move down the street are all of the additional assets that are being captured adjacent to or on the sidewalk itself. You see water and gas access points, manhole covers, fire hydrants, signage, and of course, curb ramps. All of these assets need to be cataloged, monitored, and ultimately maintained by the user. Having up-to-date imagery on a user-friendly platform saves the asset owners time and money. Now, for any user that captures road imagery, like in this case of Shaler Township, users always have the option of having their road imagery analyzed by the robotics machine learning algorithms for overall condition, just like this. So road managers are able to easily isolate their best or worst roads throughout their network. This allows them to prioritize their paving needs with surgical precision. So whether it's on or off the road, Robotics is excited to empower asset owners here in the Pittsburgh area and around the world. Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully that recording was very interesting. I found it very insightful. One thing that I noticed about AgileMapper is that it's very user-friendly, and with all that amazing technology under the hood, it's very easy for anyone with any background to just open their smartphone and use AgileMapper. Can you talk more about that ease of use and accessibility?
Sure. That was certainly an aim of kind of how we started. So my background is much more on like the product and the technology side. And I think that was definitely a driving force for us as we went to market with our technology. The reason being that, of course, if you think about sort of government and government technology, it certainly gets a bad rap. Some of it is warranted in the sense that it tends to be clunky or over-featured or issues like that. And we really wanted to strive for something that was simple without being simplistic, right? So we want to make it that this is an easy process, that our user experience is really good, and that you don't require sort of a multi-year education in geospatial data sets in order to just get started, right? We want to make this that it's accessible. Reason being twofold. One, that's what people like, and that's what people have become used to with technology products. But the second one is much more pragmatic, which is people won't use technology if it's not, if it's not usable. It's almost in the definition. And so we really focused a lot on making sure that data collection through that smartphone is easy, it's accessible, everybody can work with it, and that all of the sort of data processing and data manipulation steps that are required to go from sort of a camera traveling around the world to back to our servers and then back to the client, making sure that that's all as streamlined as possible.
Cool. Yeah, I really appreciate that, especially for a product that's in the public sector. I feel like that's usually overlooked. So your product is heavily data driven, and you keep bringing that up. So could you talk about robotics' use of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how do you see those trends forming? Because this is a new industry and it's evolving very rapidly. So how does robotics see itself in this industry?
For sure. So I think AI and more specifically machine learning is really where we've gotten a lot of advantages, and that we've been fortunate to sort of deploy clever scenarios and clever data processing techniques to make sure that we can do what we need to at the scale that we want to. And I think that, as your question about trends, that's really an important piece of this. So when it comes to the public sector gets a little bit of a bad rap. Some of it is, again, still warranted, but they tend to be a little bit further behind in terms of technology adoption, or sort of like they're rarely kind of leading the edge on terms of breakthrough technologies. AI, machine learning are very much on the leading edge right now. That is where there's a lot of innovation, a lot of effort, a lot of sort of venture capital dollars being deployed. From my perspective particularly, one of the pieces that I like a lot about Roadbotics and how we're doing this is that we're taking something that is under the hood, a very sophisticated technology, and deploying it at a problem that society has had for thousands of years, which is we have stuff and we need to manage it. And so, I think the pointy end of robotics is quite simple in the sense that it's easy and accessible. It's very easy to wrap your head around what we're going to do. Whereas sort of all the things underneath are much more complicated. And I think AI can really be that differentiator, right? It doesn't have to have at all times that sort of whiz-bang feel to it or whiz-bang appearance, right? It can do incredible things to more or less kind of, not mundane makes it seem pejorative, but just things that are sort of run-of-the-mill, things that have been going on for decades, for hundreds of years. And I think that's really exciting. I think watching Roadbotics evolve its own technology and deploy that at problems that really do impact every single person's life is very exciting to myself and to the entire team.
Yeah, those are really good points. So you brought up impact. Can you talk about the case studies that robotics did in Indiana and Georgia, and how those have impacted those respective communities?
Sure. So we've really upped the number of clients that we work with. We work with several here in the United States. Probably about 80% of our total client base is here. And then we have a few sort of internationally as well, probably tipping over about 250 government clients that we work with. The case studies you're referring to, so there's a lot of really interesting different stories that we can tell, but one of the most exciting is watching a government sort of make that transition to data-driven, and more importantly, sort of data that is objective and being driven by that. And I think Robotics has been instrumental for a lot of our clients in starting that journey towards how they manage their roads, their infrastructure, and how they do that through that data-driven approach. In the case of Savannah, Georgia, that actually led to unlocking additional funding through the state in the form of grants. And that has been sort of instrumental in sort of pushing them forward, creating a plan. So they now have a much longer term, longer horizon outlook of how they think about their roads and their infrastructure. And all of that, again, is sort of, the impetus for it is having good, solid, reliable data from which to start making those plans. And then most importantly, being able to update that data, because stale data can be just as damaging as sort of bad initial data, right? If you don't keeping track of it, you'll run into a lot of challenges. So case studies have been really instrumental for us.
Cool. Yeah. So you mentioned you have 80% of your clients that are in the States, and then you also have international clients. How does that relationship work, especially if your competitors are more traditional, when you bring up your product to these governments and it's more or less cutting edge to them?
So it's a very good question. So internationally and here in the United States, we tend to work a lot with civil engineering firms. So these are firms that are usually consulted out by a government, that government sort of needing the expertise or talents of this engineering firm. And so the engineering firms have historically done a lot of the surveying work. And as I suggested before, sort of our competitor is really that kind of boots on the ground, sitting in a car, kind of driving around. For the civil engineering firms that we work with, that has become a really compelling it's several different dimensions. One is a business prospect, right? So we can come in and do the same work sort of at a higher resolution, higher accuracy, and at a larger scale. And so, the engineering firm gets all the benefits of that. They can do more work. They can do it across multiple communities. And they're not as beholden to sort of the number of staff that they have currently, so that they can grow much faster by having each of their current staff members just be more productive, which is a great business proposition for them. And then for us, it works out in that we get our technology into more hands more quickly.
Nice. So you said, so going back to that worldwide outreach and getting the technology into all these different firms, how have you adjusted to the COVID outbreak, and how does that affect how you run your company going forward?
So it has certainly had a lot of effects. Public financing has taken quite a hit across the different sort of levels of government. One of the most relevant pieces here is that COVID has had these disproportionate effects on different geographies. So for us, roads are roads. Our business is really applicable anywhere in the world right now. And so, we've sort of cognizantly shifted where it is that we focus our attention based on what's happening with COVID. So that's certainly one element of it. And the reason being that, public institutions are having trouble, and so they're either furloughing their own workers, cutting down on costs. And so all of that leads to some challenges around continuing to sort of do business within the public sector. That's one leg of the sort of challenge with COVID. The other, though, is that as we look at infrastructure in general, we look at sort of how we want the economy to bounce back. Infrastructure is really a absolutely critical piece of that. And one of the most important pieces with infrastructure is that it's very much a long-term and very expensive play. So it requires sort of continued investment in order to make sure that both now and in the future, we continue to have a good level of infrastructure support and sort of the statuses of it. So in that vein, very much Roadbotics has been sort of benefited by clients of ours seeing that this technology is a way to help ensure that future better infrastructure comes into fruition, even in the vein of the challenges that we're having right now with COVID.
Yeah, so you said your clients and that long-term infrastructure, how did that initially get started? So how did Robotics grow, and how did you find that funding?
So Robotics is a CMU spin out. So again, about 4 years ago, we spun out of CMU. We just completed our Series A round, so that was actually our third investment round. We did that about a year ago, so last summer. And it's really come through a huge combination of really generous benefactors. So at the early days, it was much more around Pittsburgh-based funding. So Innovation Works, the URA here in Pittsburgh, they all helped to support our technology and our growth. As we started to get to larger round sizes, so to date, we've raised about $11.4 million in venture capital. We also looked at firms that were in some other cities or sort of around the world. So two of our major investors, our last one in the Series A came from Toronto, a firm called Radical Ventures. And then they were joined in the Series A round, but in the previous round, in our seed round, we had the fortune of meeting with Hyperplane, which is based in Boston. So there are certainly funds to be had. I know that's still going to be a challenge through COVID, but that is how we sort of got our start here is, spin out of CMU and then off to the races ever since.
Yeah, so off to the races. As we're wrapping up here, where do you see yourself today with robotics, and what are the long-term goals?
Sure. So I think everything we've talked about, the vision for robotics has always been around a couple of the elements we've touched on. So one is deploying these very sophisticated technologies to problems that affect everyday lives in that public sector. So I think we'll continue to be making that investment and showing those technologies and what they can do. Very much the robotics philosophy is all around that managing and maintaining public infrastructure. Today, it's primarily around roads and some sidewalk pieces. But as we grow, I think it'll start to look more like, again, if you come back to the technology and you think about sitting as the passenger in a car, and that's the camera footage that we have, there's a lot of other assets that follow those same kind of patterns of management and maintenance that a government is responsible for. So again, think about curbs, sidewalks, streetlights, traffic lights, signage. All of these things can be extracted out with our data pipelines, and then we can create tools that help governments to better manage and maintain those. That is really our vision, is to create that digital twin of the city, and then offer public officials the ability to really create a well-managed asset base, well-managed infrastructure, and all those kinds of elements. And so really just drive forward hopefully a revitalization of our infrastructure investments over the next few years as a country.
Awesome. So if people wanted to reach out to you or are more interested in your technology and want to keep up with what robotics is doing, how can they do that?
Sure. So the easiest way is our website, robotics.com. We have a lot of material on there about our products, case studies, and things like that. That is definitely the best way to learn more about us.
Thank you for having me today. This was a super interesting conversation and insightful. I hope everyone found something that they found interesting.
Likewise. Thanks so much.